Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Pryweller, Director of Conference and Event Content for the Crane Global Polymer Group. Welcome to this session of Ask the Expert. These sessions are your chance to engage live with professionals on a range of topics and to interact with questions. Today's Ask the Expert is sponsored by DelmiaWorks. Our experts today are Steve Bieszczat, Chief Marketing Officer of DelmiaWorks, and Hila Tamir, an ERP consultant at Tamir Consulting. In this session, Steve and Hila will explore how you can overcome the many challenges we all faced in 2021 and create a path to success in 2022. Steve and Hila will answer your questions after the presentation. To submit a question, email pnevents@crane.com. Or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can submit a question via those platforms. With that, I will turn things over to Steve Bieszczat of DelmiaWorks and Hila Tamir of Tamir Consulting. Steve and Hila, the floor is yours.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you again. Thanks to Plastic News for putting this event on. This is Steve Bieszczat. I'm a Chief Marketing Officer at DelmiaWorks, formerly IQMS, and I've been on this show before, and I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to introduce Hila Tamir. Hila's a manufacturing engineer by training. She spent about 15 years in the quality sector of the industry, performing ISO lead auditor, certified quality engineer, Six Sigma black belt, qualified in those areas. Went on to become a vice president of manufacturing operations for 8 years subsequent to the quality career. And today she's a consultant in the industry. I believe she has about 30 clients that she consults on manufacturing issues. And the reason I wanted to bring Hila into this environment, into this Q&A, is that her view of the marketplace. She sees, a lot of people every week with a lot of different manufacturing problems with 30 clients. A pretty broad purview of what's going on in the industry. And we wanted to discuss the challenges of 2020 and 2021 with her and get her ideas about what they look like and to how to overcome the challenges that you see. So Hila, welcome aboard.
Nice seeing you again, Steve.
And why don't we put up that first slide there? So title slide. And then we'll go to the next one, please, sir. So we titled this slide in a COVID reality, and we picked out several topics to sort of touch on: inventory, forecasting, labor. We'll explain proximity matters in just a moment, and get Hila's take on how to manage these issues. So Hila, why don't you take off on managing inventory? We'll do that one first.
Absolutely. So managing inventory in our new COVID reality is even more challenging than managing inventory before. A safety net that we used to have has been reduced. That safety net comprised of the ability to expedite. Companies used to expedite all the time. It was just something that you did. It was expensive, but it allowed you to shelter your customers from any purchasing mistakes or challenges with your supplier. Well, a lot of times now we can't expedite anymore because those trucks are just not available to ship that raw material to our plant. Another form of safety net was just reordering additional material. If a plant set up a run and made a mistake and used up that raw material, again, they could shelter their customer just by ordering some more material, and it would arrive in a timely manner, and your customer would never know that there was an issue. Well, in the COVID world now, most of us have been experiencing the reality of ordering raw material and sometimes not even knowing when it's going to arrive. So much longer lead times are a reality of COVID. And then last but not least is labor. We've all heard about the labor shortages. Those of us in manufacturing are living it day to day. And sometimes you might have the raw material in-house, but you don't have the labor to produce it. So this safety net is no longer there, which can be very very painful.
What are a couple of corrective actions you can take in order to pull inventory back into focus so you can deliver on time? What are some solutions?
Well, what I see a lot of my customers doing is that they increase their safety stock of raw material. that is pretty expensive, can be pretty expensive. And not necessarily what I recommend, but it certainly works. What I do recommend is to have frequent communication with your customers and utilize your ERP system or the data in your ERP system to talk to your customers, have a fact-based conversation with your customer about the new reality. Your customer understands that your success is their success. And if lead times on raw materials are up and raw material costs are up and you're having challenges with labor, having a heart-to-heart, data-driven conversation can really help you manage your business better so that you can deliver in a timely manner.
Yep, I agree. I think a little bit of it depends on the manufacturing type. If you're doing a lot of custom and you don't know what's coming next, it's hard to provision extra raw materials in and be assured of consuming them. But if you've got more predictable demand side, then you can lay in safety stock and compensate that way. Hila, I see the world through the lens of a manufacturing software provider and ERP, if you will. And one of the things I've seen people asking a lot about and paying a lot of attention to is forecasting software today. Do you believe that anything that's happened in the past couple of years has made forecasting more popular or more prominent? Any ideas about forecasting?
Forecasting is as important as ever. Your customers are having challenges in the COVID world. They're having the same challenges that you are with material, labor, transit. So it makes it hard for them to realize or understand what they need next week sometimes, yet alone be able to forecast what's going to happen next quarter or next year. And at the same time, they need to provide you, the supplier, with an understanding of what's coming. So, I want to share a quick story here. I was in negotiations with one of our bigger customers regarding their forecast for the next year. And that was a couple of years back. And we had their senior VP of supply chain in the room, and we're going back and forth. And then finally, he stopped the conversation and he said, well, let's just all be honest here. If we knew exactly what we needed, then we'd be issuing a PO rather than, giving you a forecast, right? So there is always a guessing game with forecast. And, you don't want to be, you as a supplier don't want to be left holding the bucket because your customer gave you a forecast for 100,000 gadgets, but only purchased 20. At the same time, you don't want to be gearing up for making 20,000 when your customer needs 100. So again, here is where great communication with your customer is critical. And being able to supply your customer with historical data coming directly out of your ERP system makes all the difference. Your ERP system helps you create realistic planning horizon, and that is very important.
So on the labor front, I think we can breeze through the topic that there's a labor shortage. Everybody knows that. What do you see in people do to hire, retain labor, and are they compensating with automation or any sort of technologies to make up for the shortage of available labor? What do you see?
Well, I see a variety of ways that companies are approaching the labor shortage. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. I have a few larger customers as well. Companies are definitely paying more, absolutely paying more and continuing to pay more for their direct labor. They're treating their employees better. It's not like they mistreated them in the past by any means. I don't want it to sound like that, but they are thinking about, how to make their employees enjoy the job more than they did in the past. They're being more flexible, and they are understanding that if you lose a critical employee today because they're expecting to make $5,000 more a year, you may be paying, 3 times that, if not more, to obtain a replacement that may not be, a better replacement. So they're definitely keeping that in mind, where I think 2 years ago that wasn't something that they talked about as much as they do now. They're getting very creative on recruiting. They are talking about increasing automation. I am seeing somewhat, some more companies moving towards automation. But you got to remember that with automation, you also need to invest in labor that can support that automation. And I think that's where especially the medium and smaller size companies have a bit of a challenge.
What about with machine monitoring or production monitoring, IoT concepts, so that one operator can run multiple machines at a time? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, funny you should mention that. What I am seeing is that production monitoring, which basically is an automated way to track your cycle time, your machine uptime, and in some cases scrap as well. The data coming out of production monitoring is being used to better utilize the operator time. So, if you go to an operator that historically had ran one machine and now you're telling them they're going to need to run 2 or 3 machines, you're going to get some resistance. But if you come with good data and you can show that operator, look, this is how much time it actually takes during the cycle. And, we're going to move these machines a little closer. And now you're going to have the ability to do this and that, but you're still going to, you're not going to run from one station to another. It's going to be done in a safe manner. You're getting better traction.
Yeah, I'm seeing a fair amount of second and third shifts run, either dark or with very light staffing, with end of arm tooling, obviously moving the materials, and then the production monitoring to alert supervisory people if something does go wrong. So it's definitely a trend that I'm seeing from the software side. Proximity matters. I made up the word proximity. You'd commented that you thought a lot of manufacturing was moving back closer to the supply chain, moving closer to the OEMs. Your observation on people reshoring and nearshoring?
I would say the proximity always mattered. One of our first, back when I was a quality manager, we had a brand new, really big project with one of the bigger companies here in San Diego. And our first shipment, they unwrapped it and they said there was a quality issue. And it was just across the border in Mexico. And within a couple of hours, we were there with our engineers making sure to solve the problem. And what could have been a disaster turned out to be actually a team building exercise. When you're close to your customer, when your supplier can just come in when there is an issue, that has always been an advantage. At the same time, companies, as we all know, for decades have been moving abroad, especially to Asian markets. And I see that there is definitely an understanding now about the importance of proximity. When COVID started, I had one of the bigger medical device customers who left us, retooled and moved to Asia 12 years ago, all of a sudden show up and say, hey, can you start producing our 15 molds in 2 weeks? I was like, no, sorry, we can't. Those molds have been in storage for 12 years. And by the way, there's a whole process that we need to go through. But, the thought that you can just let your supplier in the US go and then not expect any repercussion that involved proximity was kind of naive, at least I thought.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next slide there. So the last bullet on the previous slide was, is any of this stuff really new or has it been going on for a long time? I think that's probably, we all know that's the case. During Hila and I's discussion, strategic planning versus tactical execution, I thought she had some interesting thoughts on that. I'm a bit of a strategic planner, and Hila is right down on the floor with the tactical execution. So Hila, your thought pattern on strategic planning and then executing tactically.
I always like to give the example of Napoleon, who was a brilliant strategist. And then when he invaded Russia, his supply chain just wasn't keeping up. So what really got him was the tactical execution, right? So we come up with these great strategies, but the challenge is with the execution. Now, I've seen, and I've managed engineering groups as well. And I've seen that when you go to your Microsoft project, it's a silo. There's very little transparency. and it's its own little world, and it's not really connected to what's going on and how the project is evolving in the real world. So I always pushed my team to take advantage of integrating the strategic planning, tactical execution within your ERP system. Great advantage when you do that. Great advantage of merging your execution in your ERP system. And I'll give you an example. A new line that's coming up. Well, in the tool room, your tool room project, put that in your ERP project manager and track your dollars as well as the progress that's moving and how it's moving. Your pre-production work orders, put that on your schedule and make sure that those are happening. And if they're not happening, questions will arise, and they will arise from within the team. It's not a silo managed by engineering alone. Quality dimensions, your ERP system collects your quality dimensions, and if they are out of spec, then you're going to have a good discussion with your quality team.
Yep. I've always believed that you should do I call it new product development, new product introduction on the ERP system, so that when you do your first, that kind of ends at first article, right? When you get ready to actually ramp up volume production, everything's been tested on the ERP system too. The material availability, the dispositions, the machines, everything, all ready to go for production. So rather than doing it offline, and like you said, in some other third-party tool like Microsoft. And I also strongly believe, and this is, I guess, as the expert, so I can say this, is that your system of record, your ERP system, is not only a source of information, but it's a source of process control, and it helps manufacturers get to predictability and repeatability by executing things within a system of record or an ERP system, manufacturing software system. ISO compliance. During COVID, I heard people say, oh, we don't have to be so compliant because everybody's in a rush to get everything out. So they're sort of taking it a little bit easy on us. Do you have any observations on that, Hila? Did that really happen, or?
Not in my world, not in my reality, and not in my customer's reality. Absolutely not.
So the beat went on. And then continuous improvement, that's a phrase that, has outlived, a lot of the buzzwords in the industry. And I do see continuous improvement. I think that's one of the ways that people are dealing with material shortages, labor shortages, the more constrained environment is just to get better at everything and drop, as little scrap as possible and waste as little labor as possible. Your thoughts on continuous improvement?
I'm going to get on my soapbox here with continuous improvement, because I think that continuous improvement is way more than just, one topic, whether it's improvement in material and so forth. It really is a way of thinking. And it's something that every team member should strive for. And management should call for continuous improvement, but not just walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Because continuous improvement allows for personal growth. It assures the company's on the right path. It assures that we as a team, we're safe, we're more effective, we're doing things better. And I've seen it so many times during my career where you push this small continuous improvement project and people leave the building just feeling better about themselves, about their position, about the company, and life in general.
All right.
It's just fun to do stuff better.
You see the pride on the floor.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We've got about a minute left. Let's get to the last slide. Enterprise resource planning, ERP. As I said, I'm in the industry, so I'm biased. I think everybody watching probably knows that. But when I look at it, people say, well, they talk about ROI, they talk about profitability, they talk about growth. I think the underpinnings of ERP are the three things I've listed there: visibility, being able to manage, and see the entire business from the front office all the way through, the inventory, the procurement operations, the tooling operations, manufacturing, and on through shipping and receiving. Just having that total visibility gives you the ability to know what's going on and control what's going on, so that things that could be, out of kilter, cost running high, labor running high, material shortages, too much raw material, too little, finished goods, all that is immediately visible to the management team through basically a central console. And that when you get that visibility and you get that control and you dial in those processes, you get repeatability. And that's the point I want to get to, is that once a manufacturing operation achieves a pretty good degree of repeatability, it frees the management team up to think about better ways to do things, about how to do continuous improvement and how to build the business and grow the business and make the business more profitable, because you're not constantly chasing issues throughout the day. You've got a fairly predictable, repeatable operation that allows you a lot of time to think about improvements. Hila?
I totally agree, Steve. I also like to add the word transparency.
Yep.
Because once you present the information in a manner that is accessible to all the team players that are part of the activity, somebody's going to ask a really smart question. Hey, how come we're seeing this indicator go up while that indicator is going down? And everybody's going to go, oh, wow, really? We need to check into that. That might be a potential issue. And if we catch it now, it won't become a real issue. So yes, everything you said, and transparency.
All right, great. Joe, I think it's time to open up for questions.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Steve and Hila. Terrific presentation. Really enjoyed it. And you touched on a lot of the major issues affecting the industry right now, certainly with inventory levels, material, labor shortages, and all sorts of trucking issues, all sorts of things going on, and how we're dealing with some of that. As I mentioned at the outset, if you're interested in asking a question, you can send your question to pnevents@crane.com, or also if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can send questions via those platforms, and we'll get to them in the order that they are received. Let me start with a question about auditing, and I know you touched this very briefly, but how much time do you typically allocate to prepare for an audit?
I'm smiling here, Joe, because this is a topic I can talk on for hours, but I won't. So what I used to tell my team when I was running the quality department was, think about it like your mother-in-law is coming to visit. Okay. So yes, do you try a little harder? I mean, do you make sure that there are no cobwebs under the sofa? Absolutely. But if you need to start and doing a rehaul on your whole home, then you're in trouble. In other words, what I used to tell my customers is, come and audit us, come and visit whenever you're ready, because we lived our quality management system. It wasn't a show that we put on for a customer or for an auditor. And if you are a company where you have to do a lot of preparations before your next audit, then I urge you to think about that and make some serious changes, because a quality management system should be the way you live your day-to-day in manufacturing.
Terrific. So if you have to scramble a bit when audit's coming and you have other issues, so it's better to be prepared well in advance, I guess, for some of that, right?
A quality managed system is not a checklist that you need to complete for your customers. A quality management system is a guide map that leads you to run your business in a more profitable manner, in a safer manner, with growth, continuous improvement, and so forth. It's not a chore. It should be a way of conducting business.
Part of your routine, anyway.
Absolutely.
Speaking of quality management systems, you prefer a standalone quality management system or one that's fully integrated with your ERP system?
I'm very biased towards the one that is fully integrated. And I'll tell you why. Because I've worked in situations where we had a standalone quality management system. It was very pretty. It had a lot of bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, if it's not incorporated into your day-to-day activity, into your ERP system, if the part that is about to run, that's being set up right now in the machine, has an open CAPA, some parts in MRB, an ECO open, but your team is not aware of that because that quality management system, that QMS, is a silo, then you're losing a lot of the effectiveness that a QMS information system can provide.
Makes sense. I guess we talked a little bit about with these issues about ERP systems really being more important. Are you seeing a real uptick in the amount of integrated ERP systems that are in the marketplace that are coming along right now? Is it being driven by some of the issues that you talked about?
It is. What surprises me, Joe, is the amount of companies, successful companies, medium-sized companies that run using QuickBooks and Excel and understand that they've really reached their limit, like their growth limit, because there is only so much scheduling, there's only so much shipping that you can do when you're utilizing QuickBooks and Excel. And then there's the understanding that an ERP system is needed. And then, I sit on discovery calls and discovery meetings with these customers, and we really drill down into what is needed, what is required in order for them to be successful and make that next leap and grow. And a quality management system, an integrated quality management system, almost always comes up.
Terrific. Hila, you mentioned production tracking briefly. Do you mean by the operator or by some sort of IoT-based equipment monitoring system?
It's challenging when an operator, a supervisor is tracking production. They do the best job that they can, but they don't know when they miss. And so I am not a fan of humans tracking production. I really am a fan of sensors tracking production. What I see, and I'm working on that with a project. I have a project right now with one of my customers where when the humans report machine downtime and issues, we're getting only about 30% of what is actually happening. And once we put a sensor in there and we started comparing the sensor data with the human data, we just discovered so many additional opportunities for improvements and for savings. It's pretty exciting.
Excellent. We only have a couple minutes left. Again, if you want to get a quick question in before we end the session, you can send them to pnevents@crane.com or send them to us via LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. I'm curious, we mentioned at the outset a bit about forecasting. How difficult is that in this environment when we're not sure about lead times, we're not sure about when materials are coming and that kind of thing? Is it bringing an extra set of challenges during COVID? How do you get around some of that?
I can answer.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'll go just real quickly. What I'm seeing, Joe, is sort of scenario planning, where they're sort of making plan A, plan B, and plan C based upon one, what the orders are going to look like, two, what the material availability is going to be, and three, if there's any labor constraints. So they're not setting up to go, this is absolutely what's going to happen. They're setting up to say, well, if one of these three things is likely to happen, we're going to be ready to react and provide for those needs. Hila?
No, I totally agree with what you said, Steve. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Yeah, it's sort of like a forecasting tool is a great what if tool if you say you look at it like that, right? And that's what they're using it for, I believe.
Though in manufacturing, there's always going to be something that you didn't expect that's going to happen. It's just the name of the game.
That's true, COVID or non-COVID or any situation, I guess. Anyway, there's always going to be you got to plan for the unexpected, I guess, or manage the unexpected, right?
Yep. And Joe, what's the magazine see from what's issue 1 and 2 from the magazine's perspective?
Oh, I think we're right along the same path as you, Steve, as far as we've written a lot about worker shortages and especially the need for skilled workers right now. And We're talking about with even with ERP systems and IoT, how you need workers that are a little more skilled in certain areas as opposed to just somebody who works on a line anyway. And material shortages, and we've seen materials and pricing go up and down and back and forth and all over the place too. So it's been a little bit of I don't know if I call it chaotic totally, but a bit of a disruptive time anyway, what we've seen out there. So it's something I have to manage, I guess, Steve.
Yeah.
So I've got a story, I think, that kind of represents the times. I was at a customer's and one of his clients just canceled a really big order and he was just ecstatic about it. And I'm like, why are you so happy? And he said, well, the material that I ordered for this order is now 3 times more expensive. I'm going to make a whole lot of money on this cancellation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy time. Hopefully, we see it settle down some in 2022. We'll see what happens with some of that. Yeah, you mentioned too about historical data. Is it in the time that we're in? Is it more difficult to use some of that historical data to predict the future? Since there's a bit of uncertainty out there in the marketplace, or can you still use that successfully?
I think it depends on the industry. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I mean, it's sort of odd. I've been dealing with this for a long time. Historical data becomes predictive data in almost any situation, right? Because everybody tracks what they ship, right? So pretty soon you've got all the shipment data, which becomes the purchase history of customers and production history of your own plant. So you have those records, and it's always better to have some sort of guidepost than to have nothing at all. I think we've all looked at data and said, well, that's not exactly right, but I'm sure glad I know what that is, because at least it gives me a foundation to form my current opinions upon. And I think that's what we're seeing is people are looking at historical data and sort of in their own mind cogitating up how it's going to be about that, but different because of 3 or 4 factors.
Makes sense. With that, let me ask you if you have any final thoughts you want to share with the audience, leave the audience with today. Anything you want to add before we close up?
Thank people for attending, one, and just signal our respect for the industry and the people in the industry and all they've done over the past 2 years to provide goods and materials to the communities around the world, and kind of keep the lights on for all of us. Thank you, industry.
Ditto.
Excellent. Go ahead, Hila.
Yeah, and I wanted to say was that manufacturing is not for the lighthearted. There's always something happening, and it really is how you react as a company and how quickly you react that makes the difference. And I've been working with some great companies that are doing some miraculous things, and it's great to see manufacturing in America.
Excellent. We'll leave that on a nice positive note anyway. I want to thank Steve and Hila for a terrific presentation. I want to thank DelmiaWorks for sponsoring this Ask the Expert session. If you have additional questions for Steve and Hila, please feel free to reach out to them directly, and contact information is right there on your screen if you want to ask additional questions or get with them on a particular issue that you're facing or project that you want to talk about anyway. Today's Ask the Expert will also be available for viewing on the events section of Plastics News website. I'm Joe Pryweller with the Crane Global Polymer Group. Thanks for joining us today at today's Ask the Expert, and thanks again to DelmiaWorks for sponsoring this session. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Steve.